Yo, what's good? It's your host, Pro Bowl wide receiver Allen Robinson. My co-host, Principal Kamora, will not be here today, so I'll be running the show solo. So let's get right into it. First up on the list, Penn State's new coach, Matt Campbell. Man, I'm very, very, very excited and ecstatic for what Penn State has done. I know there were a lot of rumblings and rumors on how Penn State butchered their coach's selection, but I think they did a phenomenal job. If somebody had told me the day after we fired James Franklin that we would have got Matt Campbell, I would have been ecstatic. And, history seems to repeat itself. And for myself, being a Penn State alum, I think it's more so about the school than anything. When you look at when Joe Paterno stepped down, Bill O'Brien took over under unprecedented times. Actually, as a player, we didn't even see Coach O'Brien until February of that year. I know college football is a little different now with transfer portal and also with early signing day and stuff like that. But as far as the recruiting class and everything, I think Penn State will be okay. This is not the worst situation that we've ever been in. And then fast forward into O'Brien's tenure at Penn State. He then, a month before the season, we had unprecedented sanctions come in. So he coached under reduced scholarships, under the gun for 2 years, and Penn State was just fine and stayed afloat. Fast forward to James Franklin. Bill O'Brien left for the NFL after New Year's. James Franklin, same thing. Not the best of circumstances, not the best of situations for a coach to take another job that late in the process. James Franklin took the job. Same thing, under sanctions, and Penn State was just fine. So my message to Penn State fans out there and to the Big Ten, we will be back on top for sure. I think it's just a matter of time. We have a phenomenal coach who's in. He's going to do his thing, and we're going to be just fine. Next up, the college football play-in. I know it was some teams upset, Notre Dame in particular. But I saw Coach Gruden kind of bring up, and I know we're talking a little bit more college football to start the show off, but I saw Coach Gruden say that should there be somewhat of a college football plan? And I think it should. Not every conference has a conference championship at the end of the season. There are teams who are sitting at home watching for other teams to lose and hope that they ease their way in. But I think we could have saw some matchups late in the season for teams to have been able to put their bid in to then get into the college football playoff. Notre Dame being one of them, especially with them not having a conference championship and how those things kind of play out. So there will be a few less snubs. I don't think that the process by any means is flawless. Each and every year, there's going to be teams that are going to say that they should have gotten to the tournament. I think that happens all the time. But like anybody else, for teams that feel like they got snubbed in the Big Ten or snubbed in the SEC, just like the NFL, if you win your division, you're in. And then you have the next up, which is somewhat of the wild card teams who then have an option or chance to get in based on their record as well. So I'm looking forward to see the college football playoff. I know it'll be taking place in a couple of weeks. Also, again, shout out to Penn State, man. They in the Pinstripe Bowl in New York. I'll be making an appearance there. So hopefully we can kind of start our 2026 off the right way. Moving on to the NFL. Me watching games every Sunday, I think a common theme that I see is the continuity in the NFL or lack thereof. And I say lack thereof because teams that come to mind for me are the Pittsburgh Steelers is one. And I'll speak on that situation. I've saw rumors and rumblings of Mike Tomlin possibly being on the hot seat, which to me is absolutely ridiculous. I understand the circumstances and teams wanting to get to the playoffs and wanting to win in the playoffs. But over the past few years, when you look at them on the offensive side of the ball, they had Matt Canada as the offensive coordinator. They had Mitchell Trubisky as the quarterback, Kenny Pickett as the quarterback, Mason Rudolph as the quarterback, Russell Wilson as the quarterback, Justin Fields, Aaron Rodgers, all those in about a 4-year span, not to mention the revolving door or so, if you will, of receivers in and out. And I say that because in the NFL, it's not easy by any means to be able to continue to stack seasons or be able to put together cohesiveness with that much change. And when you do that, looking at the offensive side of the ball for them, they haven't seemed to be able to get into the rhythm. And that's just players alone. Not to mention, you have Matt Canada for a couple years. Then you fire him and you have an interim offensive coordinator. Then you have Arthur Smith take over. So having that much change on one side of the ball in particular makes it a lot more difficult because not only do you have guys who are playing in their first years in the system and just learning because you don't have that much time. Once you get into OTAs, you have about 10 practices or so. Then you get into mandatory mini camp, you get a long break, and then you get into training camp. And having new guys like Jonnu Smith being one of your pivotal players and receivers, DK Metcalf, Aaron Rodgers, you have a rookie running back that you drafted in the second round. You have all these players trying to learn on the fly to then be able to have the production that you want to see. And sometimes it takes a year or two. You know, a lot of offenses don't really come into their own until about, I would say, 20 to 25 games under an offensive coordinator before guys start to feel comfortable and start to take ownership. That's the big thing in the NFL. When you see the best teams across the league, they take ownership in what they're doing offensively, defensively. Now, when you look at a team like the Dallas Cowboys, one thing that they kept, even though they switched coaches in Schottenheimer, they kept the continuity. You bring in a person like George Pickens, but he's now playing with guys like Dak Prescott, who's been there and been in that system for a little bit. CeeDee Lamb, who's been in that system for a little bit. And when you have guys like that, they can help bring the others along. Turpin, he's another guy who's been in the system for a while. So when you have that and you have that continuity and you have players around, you can slowly bring others up to speed with how the game goes. So sometimes I know a lot of fans out there and fan bases, they want to see their teams hit it out the park when they get new players or get new offensive coordinators. And again, that does happen sometime, just not all the time. Another team that comes to mind when I think of continuity is the Philadelphia Eagles. And for them right now, man, they're struggling. But again, how many teams in the NFL have had four different offensive coordinators in 4 seasons? And I say that because you aren't building upon each year, you're learning. And one thing about the NFL is when you're learning, rather than playing and playing fast and playing off instinct, it slows you down a little bit. Even watching the game on Monday night, I could see some of the reads and stuff, their overall offense. And I know I've been seeing, is this a Jalen Hurts problem? I don't really think it's a Jalen Hurts problem because at the end of the day, what we know for the Philadelphia Eagles is like last year, Saquon Barkley had an MVP-like run, over 2,000 all-purpose yards, broke records, could have broke even more records. I believe he sat out in the last game. Their run game hasn't been able to be established this year. And they have two really good running backs. The quarterback, the O-line, the receiver play. Everybody seems to be taking a step not in the right direction, but I think that's come from the scheme and them learning. Like I said before, it's like learning a different language when you go through different offenses and offensive coordinators or defenses. The terminology is not the same. You have things that may have been called one thing a year ago, and they're called something else now. And you have to constantly flush your brain and relearn the terminology of what things are called. And mind you, these are the same type of concepts and it looks the same, but it's called something different. It's literally like learning a different language. So I can kind of feel for them a little bit as far as being in the NFL and having to learn different offenses over a quick span. And at the end of the day, everybody doesn't learn the same. You know, you got some guys that how they pick up the offense is a little bit easier than others. You have some guys who are big study guys who are going to be looking into the details of the offense constantly, trying to figure out what they can do better and how they can get it fixed. And then you have others who aren't. And that's just the reality of it. So for the Philadelphia Eagles, I know people are panicking right now, which I mean you should. 'Cause at the end of the day, this time of year, you should be heating up rather than looking how they look and taking 3 losses. But at the same time, when you lose the kind of coordinators and stuff that they have over the years, I don't think every single year is just going to be a home run or a year that you hit out the park. And I think they're going to learn this year. I'm very curious to see where they go from here. I did read that Nick Sirianni has been a little bit more focused on the offense and just kind of some of the details within that and how he's going to kind of take that over a little bit more and take a little bit more ownership himself to be able to try to get that in the right direction. Next up on the list, Jordan Love versus Bo Nix. And I bring those two up because I say that because we have a lot of young quarterbacks who are going to be entering or who are in the playoff race right now. And actually in the 2025 season marks the third time since realignment in 2002, also 2014 and 21, that no playoff berths have been clinched entering week 15. And I bring that up because we have a lot of parity, as we've saw in the NFC North itself with the Packers, the Detroit Lions, and the Chicago Bears. They've switched division leaders over the past few weeks now, a couple times. And I bring up the Jordan Love versus Bo Nix because they have a matchup this week. And I think both of these young quarterbacks have had ups and downs. Both defenses are playing lights out. But who is going to take the next step? Another reason why I bring them up is because I saw the Jordan Love and Christian Watson connection really take legs, really grow legs, and gain some traction over the past couple weeks. And he's the one person that I said, if it's anybody who can make it easy on the Green Bay Packers or easier on the Green Bay Packers moving forward and some of the offensive woes that they had throughout the course of the season, is Christian Watson. And it's Christian Watson because he's a guy who can win one-on-ones down the field, crossing routes, and be able to turn short plays into long plays and catch the down the field ball. Now, as far as Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos, for whatever reason, they've struggled a lot, especially in the first three quarters of the game. I know everybody likes to talk about the Bo Nix clutch gene and just where he's at with that. And he's played phenomenal in the fourth quarter. Obviously, we saw them score 33 points against the New York Giants earlier this year to come back to win a game that they probably had a 1% chance of winning going into the fourth quarter, but they came back and won. They'll probably be the team that wins the division this year. I know the Chargers are on their heels, but they'll probably win the division, which will be the first time in a few years. So for what Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos are doing, they're really on the up and up. But how does that equate to playoff football? Because playoff football is a little bit different. You have to score points, you have to score touchdowns and not field goals. You aren't going to be able to get yourself in a hole and dig yourself out in the playoffs because you're going to be playing against some really, really, really good teams who are peaking right around this time, just as the Denver Broncos are. So I'm very excited for this matchup this week. Me personally, I think I'm going to give the edge to the Green Bay Packers. And I'm going to give the edge to the Green Bay Packers because I like what they're doing offensively, and they seem to have some confidence moving forward. Like I said before, Christian Watson has played very well. We also saw a Deontay Wicks. We saw him play very well against the Detroit Lions and make some clutch catches on Thanksgiving to seal the game. So some of the younger players seem to be now growing a little bit and kind of coming into their own on the offensive side of the ball. And moving towards the defense, Micah Parsons and what that defense has been able to do all year, whether if it's against the Detroit Lions, against the Chicago Bears, they've always seemed to play the best when their best is required. And Micah Parsons is leading the charge with that. Next up, I guess this is a thing now in sports, and shout out to the old heads being able to still do it, man. But Phillip Rivers coming back to play, 44 years old, haven't played in 5 years. The Indianapolis Colts are fighting for their playoff lives. And also another note, 7 of 8 divisions have a team in first place or tied for first that did not win the division last season. And why do I bring that up? Because this 40-year-old, this not 40-year-old, 44-year-old Phillip Rivers has a lot on the line and a lot at stake. But what I do know about Phillip Rivers is I think that's exactly why he's coming back. For him, and I've heard him speak about it before. I think for him, and he kind of said, if it was an opportunity for him to come back, it would have to be with everything on the line. And what better time than to do it now? And he's a guy who's played in this offense his entire career, has had success. I think he's going to bring the juice. He's one of the best non-cursing trash talkers in the history of the game, which I think will bring some juice to the Indianapolis Colts right now. They've dropped a few games in a row. Daniel Jones went out for the season. So you have a team that may be just a little bit depleted when it comes to just how things have been over the past few weeks. So bringing Phillip Rivers in might give them a little bit of juice. Now, I'm looking forward to hear from the fans to see what they think about Phillip Rivers and to see if he would have any success. But this also brings up another kind of point for me. There's no other young quarterbacks around the league on nobody's practice squad or anything that the Colts believe in more than a 44-year-old who hasn't played in 5 years. And I find that a little strange just based on the simple fact that one, they don't have a quarterback that they have developed or that they feel good enough about, or there's not enough quarterbacks that people feel good about on other practice squads that they'll be able to get to bring to their roster. I saw today that there were some talk shows and stuff talking about if the trade deadline should be pushed back. No, the trade deadline should not be pushed back by any means. What needs to happen is there needs to be a little bit better development of younger quarterbacks. And I don't just think that that starts at the NFL level. I think that starts a little bit at the college level as well. But for it not to be a younger person or a more viable option to be able to come in and take the reins other than Phillip Rivers, to me, it's just kind of it's funny. And it's also the fact of, listen, I'm not 44, but we talk all the time. Some of the 32, 33, 34-year-old players who are sitting on their couch, man, they probably still could go. I know they were saying that they're going to see if Phillip Rivers, how his body responds to practice over the next couple of days to see if he'll be ready to go on Sunday. But by the way it's looking, I think Phillip Rivers is going to be starting, and you better believe I will be tuned in for that. Moving on. It's been a lot of surprises this year. I think when you look at some of the main quarterbacks that we're used to seeing in the playoffs, they've been in a wild card race. You look at the Jared Goff's wild card race, Patrick Mahomes, they're on the outside looking in. Josh Allen, wild card race. Lamar Jackson, they're on the outside looking in. Some of the guys that we've grown accustomed to watching in the playoffs are they're fighting for their playoff lives right now. So that's been surprising to me. But what has been more surprising to you, the Eagles or the Chiefs? For me, I would have to go with the Eagles. The Eagles have been more surprising for me just for the reasons that I kind of talked about earlier. Even though they had some of the turnover with their team, they still have the same roster that they've had over the past few years. So they still have their core players. And sometimes your core players, they can be the ones that can kind of steer the ship in the right direction, even when you have coordinators transitioning in and out of offensive play caller, offensive coordinator, what their roles are within the offense, being being promoted to having bigger roles and things like that. I'm not really surprised by the Chiefs. I know people are saying that the Chiefs dynasty is over, but I think when you have Patrick Mahomes, I don't ever think anything is over. But I do think that they need to go for a little bit of a rebuild this offseason. But I mean, that's warranted. You have the Kansas City Chiefs now who've ran the table since Patrick Mahomes has been the starter. I believe this would be the first year that they did not win the division. So at some point in time, there was going to be somewhat of a changing of the guard, not only in the AFC, but in the AFC West in particular. So that doesn't really surprise me by any means. Some of their core players that they've had over the years that have played well for them and made big plays like Travis Kelce, Chris Jones, those guys are getting a little bit older. Tyreek Hill left a few years ago. You had Tre'Davious Ward. He left. You had a couple other cornerbacks that left. And the way that the NFL works is, it's all about parity. When you have guys on your team, you can't pay everybody. Even as far as you've seen their roster and guys that have left. Also, they're not drafting at the top of the draft either. So guys are getting a little bit used to what they're doing on defense. They have a young receiving core that's going to take some time to grow. You have Rasheed Rice. I thought he's played solid this year, could be a little bit better, has had some crucial drops for them. But he also gave them a great spark when he came back. And I think his future is very bright. But right now, they're struggling a little bit at the receiver position. But I think their future is bright, though. You have Xavier Worthy, who's a very good young player. Rasheed Rice, same very good young player. I think based on where they sit right now, they'll pick higher than they've picked in recent years in the draft. I think they may be able to get a player who's a playmaker to come in and impact them right away. So I don't think it's just over for the Chiefs. Whenever you have Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, never say never. Now, this year might be over to some degree, but I don't think the future is when it comes to the Chiefs and the Chiefs dynasty. They have a phenomenal coaching staff. They also have one of the best quarterbacks in the history of the game that we've seen. We haven't saw any quarterback come into the NFL and do the things that Patrick Mahomes has done year in and year out, and the consistency that they've had. And like I said before, the NFL is all about parity. So to think that a team is going to come in and just dominate over the time span that they've had, how they've had, and continue to do that, you have to be mistaken. But I believe Patrick Mahomes has 5 Super Bowl appearances, 3 Super Bowls, and to be able to do that at the age that he is right now is already remarkable. And I think now he'll kind of catch his second win. They'll kind of rebuild and reboot that team around him. And I think they'll continue to push forward in the right direction. Now, Philly, on the other hand, I think a little bit different. I think for them, I don't want to say that their time has passed, but obviously, very similar to the Kansas City Chiefs, some of their best players are aging a little bit. Contracts will now start to come up. They have young guys on defense who are going to need to be paid. So they have to figure it out this offseason as far as the direction that they want to move in. Obviously, we've saw all season now they've had some disgruntled players. How true that is, I do not know. Whenever you're losing, you're going to have disgruntled players. The only thing that cures people being disgruntled is winning. And right now, the Eagles haven't been able to do that to what they're accustomed to and to what their standard is now, losing 3 games in a row. Going into this season, I believe early in the season, Jalen Hurts was like 18-1, 19-1, or 20-1 over his past 18 or so games earlier this year. So for them to now lose 3 in a row, that's been significant. And for them, those are things that can really challenge your culture, challenge your locker room, and also your organization. But I heard Jalen Hurts say it himself. This game was what it was, and it's about how you respond. And one thing that I do know about Jalen Hurts is he's one of the most even-keeled people that we've saw over the past few years at the quarterback position. When the highs are high, he's not. And when the lows are low, he's not too low. He stays right in the middle. And I think that's the perfect mentality and mindset to be able to continue to rally the troops around you to try to find some type of rhythm and continuity moving through December here, going into January, because it does look like they're going to win the division. So they will be in the playoffs. So for them, it's how do they make some noise in the playoffs? Another reason why you can't totally count them out for this year is they have a phenomenal defense and a great defensive coach in Vic Fangio. So with having that, they always have a shot. And Vic Fangio is another guy who, when his best is required as a defensive play caller, he calls his best. One thing that has been a topic for me over the past, I guess, season and a half to 2 seasons, and I know we have some, so I want to be very detailed and specific when I mention this, but where are the down the field threats? That's the title of this that I came up with, and I know there are down the field threats. Don't get me wrong. Your Jamar Chases of the world, Jamison Williams of the world, Jackson Smith and Jingba is catching the ball down the field. Puka Nakua. But I say that because, and I don't think it's more on the players. I think it's more on the play callers and the schemes that have really taken precedence in the NFL right now. When I came into the NFL in 2014, you had Brandon Marshall, AJ Green, Julio Jones, Antonio Brown, DeAndre Hopkins, myself, Devontae Adams, just to name a few guys who were heavily down the field threats and targeted down the field. I feel like with the scheme changing and it being more so a catch and run type of game as far as the opportunities that people are trying to create. And I say that because I've heard over recent weeks coaches say that 50-50 ball opportunities and those kind of plays down the field aren't high percentage plays, or that's not the world that they were living in. And I say that because I think that's why we have saw a lot of up and down with quarterbacks, especially some of the young quarterbacks. I was talking to one of my colleagues specifically about the Green Bay Packers, and I also spoke about this a little bit earlier in the show. But I said that as soon as the Packers get Jordan Love or give him the opportunity to throw the ball and give Christian Watson the opportunity to make some one-on-one plays down the field, I think that will really be the spark to the Green Bay Packers offense. And sure enough, that is what happened. And I say that because Jordan Love is a very talented quarterback, and one of his talents is ball placement. And I say ball placement because when you give him the opportunity to be able to throw a back shoulder pass to a Christian Watson, or be able to allow him to kind of not turn his mental off a little bit, but not overthink what's going on schematically and conceptually, and just have him place the ball and give guys one-on-one opportunities. I think that's when some of the guys are at their best. And from my head, what sticks out to me is some of the one-on-one opportunities that was given, like I said before, Tay Wicks for the Green Bay Packers. He ended the game with like a deep cross at number 3. That was a bang, bang. I'm not going to say it was a 50-50 ball, but Jordan Love, phenomenal ball placement. Great play by Tay Wicks. You look at last week, the slant that Christian Watson ran to score against the Chicago Bears, and also some of the down the field plays that he's made this year. And I say that because Jordan Love, one of the greatest assets that he has as a player is ball placement. And I use him specifically because I've noticed some of the ups and downs of the Green Bay Packers. And I personally think right now a theme going along in the NFL is coordinators being a little bit too schemy rather than letting their guys play. And I say that because when you see some of the offenses and how sparks can fly, when you look at your Cincinnati Bengals, obviously that is Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, but they don't overcomplicate it. Joe Burrow is a phenomenal ball placer. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins can go get the ball and make plays. And when they allow them to do that, they're at their best. But now when you look at some other teams, you have to factor in a lot more things when you look at the scheme. Pressure. I even look at the Detroit Lions. You know, they have some guys banged up front on their O line. So some of the things and times that's most challenging for them is just being able to get into their bag with some of the pressure that may take place against certain teams. So now you're trying to figure out, okay, how do we still run our scheme with some of the pressure that may take place for us? And I think sometimes some of those things that eliminate pressure and eliminate some of those things happening is giving your guys one-on-one. And I think that's something that Detroit Lions have done down the stretch as well. I've seen Jamison Williams on the outside win some one-on-one routes and stop routes, deep digs and stuff like that. So, and I say that because, again, for me, whenever I look at an offense and I see woes, I always go back to say, okay, what's the scheme? How are the playmakers being used, and are they being allowed? And when I say allowed, meaning are the coordinators calling the plays for them to go make plays and be at their best. And keep it simple. When you have some of these high paid receivers, man, don't overcomplicate it. Just get them some one-on-one opportunities and give them a shot, and they'll go out there and make plays. Last up on the list for today, warming up in December. Me and Prince kind of talked about this last show. He had a little bit difference of opinion than me. I thought the Houston Texans were the team that was really heating up and on the rise when it came to December, and he thought it was the Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, there's a handful of teams that come to mind. For me, it's the Houston Texans come to mind. The Carolina Panthers have been a team that's hot, a team that we shit on early in the year a lot. Miami Dolphins, as of late, are coming along and have really heated up. So those are a few teams just to name. But the number one on my list that's warming up in December is the Houston Texans. Man, I say Houston Texans because their defense is playing phenomenal. Obviously, you have Danielle Hunter rushing the passer. You have Will Anderson rushing the passer. But you also have the secondary that's taking away the rock. And I think whenever you have a pass rush that they have, with a guy like Derek Stingley on the back end that can guard a team's best receiver, but not just guard him, be able to go out there and make plays. And I think that you're seeing that around their secondary. They've been a team that's given some of the best quarterbacks in our game fits. We saw what the Houston Texans defense did to Kansas City Chiefs last week. They had them on the ropes the entire game. We saw on the Thursday night a couple weeks ago what the Houston Texans did to Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. I think that the Houston Texans are going to be a very scary team down the stretch here that teams are not going to want to see. I have to look at how the AFC will shake out. I think the wild card race is going to be tough, so they might have to win their division to get in based on a few other teams. But that's one team that I know a lot of teams, as they're looking through the rankings of teams that are in the playoffs, that they have their fingers crossed that if I'm one of those top seeds in the AFC, man, seeing that Houston Texans defense is not going to be fun. Another team that I didn't mention is the Steelers. And I say the Steelers not because they're solely just heating up, but I think you can see some of the confidence building in that group. And again, this is the most that they've been together. When I say most, meaning that Aaron Rodgers now getting into the last quarter of the season. So he likes what he likes, and he's starting to get some tendencies. And I've heard him speak about the maturity of the receivers, and he spoke about the maturity of the receivers because they also signed one of his buddies from Green Bay, MVS, Marquez Valdez-Scantling. They signed him to their practice squad, elevated him. You have DK Metcalf, you have Calvin Austin. So they have some veterans in their room that Aaron Rodgers is familiar with. And also, like I've said time and time again, the Steelers, for whatever reason, man, they have teams like the Ravens number. I know the Ravens were hot, and they've taken some step back, losing back-to-back weeks, and their playoff hopes looks like they're slipping away. And it looks like the Steelers may run away with that division. They're another team that they may be a tough out in the playoffs, man. I'm very excited to see how the end of the season shakes out in the AFC, in particular, because we'll see some guys in the playoffs that we haven't seen before. Like I said before, Bo Nix being one of them, Drake May being another. So having some young quarterbacks going up against some veteran quarterbacks who've been there but are now wild card teams should shape up for a very exciting ending of the season. Also, moving to the NFC. Same with the NFC. Two divisions that come to mind for me is the NFC North and the NFC West. You have 6 really good teams with the Rams, the Seahawks, the 49ers, the Lions, the Packers, and the Bears. And I know 2 or so of those teams aren't going to get in. And the way that they shake out, all those teams play each other here down the stretch. So if it's any time to be a football fan or to really want to tap into the NFL, it's now, because all these games here late in December will be like playoff games. Moving to my favorite segment of the show because this is where we make our money. I don't know about y'all, but this is where I make some money at. Easy money at that. The guaranteed picks. The guaranteed picks for week 15 that I'm going with, and it's still some more. Like I said before, I always like to give y'all a solid little base, but there's a couple more games to add in there if you want to get those odds a little bit more in your favor. There are also some parlays as far as player props as well to add to your parlay for guys who'll be scoring touchdowns. But for me, I'll start my week off with Buccaneers over the Falcons, Houston Texans over the Arizona Cardinals, Philadelphia Eagles over the Las Vegas Raiders, and the Seattle Seahawks against the Indianapolis Colts. And guys that I like to score is, I know George Pickens is going to have let me choose my words correctly. I just know George Pickens, me knowing George, he's going to be excited going into this week and wanting to get into the end zone. I like him to score. Amon-Ra St. Brown, same for him. Big game against the Rams. I know he's going to be more healthy than he was last week and looking forward to making an impact, especially coming off the long week as well. I like him to score. Mike Evans will be back this week. Always like Mike Evans on a red zone fade or slant to score whenever he's in the lineup. So those are just a few things that I like that I'll probably add to my parlay specifically with the NFL. Like I said before, NBA Cup semifinals is playing this week as well. If you like some of those teams, add that to your list as well. Christmas is right around the corner. Put a little bit more cheese in your pocket to do some Christmas shopping, some day after Christmas shopping, and just a little bit more cheese in your account going into the new year. But for this episode, that of the press release is it. Allen Robinson, I'm your host, Pro Bowl wide receiver. Until next time.